great article about chivalry and courtly love. And the basis of the article is that when conservatives mourn our loss of chivalry in our modern feminist age, the values taught in the tales like Lancelot and the Knight of the Cart are what they are referring to in this lost virtue of chivalry. He says, courtly love was from the very beginning a glorification of adultery and a worship of women, with men ritually debasing themselves to the intertwined sovereigns of romantic love and women. So there's this idea of worshiping women and romantic love intertwined with chivalry there. So he goes on to talk about the book, or the tale, Lancelot, the Knight of the Cart. And C.S. Lewis even writes about this in his book, Allegory of Love, talking about this idea of chivalry, courtly love, romantic love, and how these are not biblical things. Courtly love and chivalry are not biblical things the way it played out. But he says in the poem, Lancelot challenges Meleagant to a fight to defend Guinevere's honor after Meleagant accuses Guinevere of adultery, which she was in an adulterous affair with Lancelot because she was married to King Arthur, right in the tale. And it says, and this leads to Lancelot fighting in a tournament. However, as Lancelot is duty bound to follow his lady's every whim, he at first must humiliate himself by losing the match. So he says there's kind of a backstory here that Lancelot comes to defend Guinevere's honor at this tournament, and Guinevere, who again is King Arthur's wife, is abducted by Meleagant, and Lancelot, one of King Arthur's knights, sets out on a quest to free her, and he is in an adulterous relationship with her as well. So, as one of the prime virtues in courtly love is a man debasing himself out of romantic love for another man's wife. So Lancelot is early on forced to humiliate himself by riding in a cart. This is, Lewis offers more detailed explanation of the symbolism of the cart. The cart Lancelot rides in is no ordinary cart in the story, but a tumbril, a cart to haul manure that was also used to humiliate criminals, similar to a cucking stool. After much hardship and humiliation, Lancelot finally encounters Guinevere, but his queen rebukes him coldly because she has learned of his momentary hesitation in climbing into the tumbril. And it says in the story, it says when he crossed the bridge, wounded in hands, knees, and feet, he comes at last into the presence of the queen, and she will not speak to him, which is Guinevere. So eventually Guinevere warms to Lancelot, then she commits adultery with him, and ironically, this is the act of adultery that Lancelot is defending her name against. So in the story, it says that they spend a passionate night together after Lancelot breaks into her tower. He injures his hand during his break-in and leaves blood all over Guinevere's sheets. Lancelot sneaks out of the tower before sunrise, and Meleagant accuses Guinevere of committing adultery with Lancelot, who is the only wounded knight nearby. And so Lancelot then challenges Meleagant to a fight to defend Milady's honor. The White Knight comes to defend her honor, even though she is an adulteress and he is the one committing adultery with her. So Pastor Dalrock writes, when conservatives mourn our ostensibly lost sense of chivalry in our feminist age, the values taught in tales like Lancelot and the Knight of the Cart are what they are referring to as a lost virtue. Courtly love was from the very beginning a glorification of adultery. This is not something that anyone in the church should be interested in continuing. It is a worship of women, with men debasing themselves in pursuit of romantic love with women. And so he says C.S. Lewis explains about Lancelot and Guinevere that the submission which Lancelot shows in his actions is accompanied on the subjective side by a feeling that deliberately apes religious devotion. Although his love is by no means supersensual and is indeed carnally rewarded, in the very poem he is represented as treating Guinevere with saintly if not divine honors. When he comes before the bed where she lies, he kneels and adores her. So even C.S. Lewis realizes that chivalry and courtly love is rooted in this worship of romantic love and women. So Pastor Dalrock writes, even after Lancelot worships Guinevere's sexuality, and even while he is defending her non-existent honor, she is an adulteress, Lancelot demonstrates the virtue of courtly love by yet again humiliating himself. So this is a thing you must do in courtly love. You must humiliate yourself to prove your love for your lady. So in the story it goes, even when he is forgiven, his trials are not yet at an end. The tournament at the close of the poem gives Guinevere another opportunity of exercising her power to humiliate him. When he has already entered the lists in disguise and all as usual is going down before him, she sends him a message ordering him to do his poorest in the competition. So Lancelot obediently lets himself be unhorsed by the next knight that comes against him, and then takes to his heels, feigning terror of every combatant that passes near him. The herald mocks him for a coward, and the whole field takes up the laugh against him. So Lancelot is losing on purpose in the competition to defend Milady's honor, and everybody's laughing at him because he must be humiliated to prove his love for Milady. So it says the queen looks on delighted. Can you believe that? The next morning, the same command is repeated, and he answers my thanks to her if she will so. This time, however, the restriction is withdrawn before the fighting actually begins. So he's going to acquiesce again to lose for Milady, but then she says, okay, you don't have to lose. Now, this kind of stuff happened in The Knight's Tale. I really like the movie A Knight's Tale with Heath Ledger. I thought that was a really well done, just a fun movie. And that's what happens in there. I didn't know that was rooted in the story of Lancelot and the cart. That his lady in the movie, of course, he's this knight who's winning competitions, and he tells his lady, declares his love for her, I'll win this competition for you. And she says, no, if you're going to really prove your love for me, you're going to lose. And so they go through that whole thing, and he loses a whole bunch, and then she finally says, okay, you don't have to lose anymore, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't know that was rooted in the story of Lancelot and courtly, adulterous love. And of course, in the movie, they fornicate with each other as well. So Pastor Dalrock, he sums up, conservatives mourn the loss of chivalry because the idea that a woman's sexuality is divine is, if anything, more deeply rooted today than it was in the original works of courtly love nearly 1,000 years ago. In the past, this divinity was merely implied, but today we have conservative pastors explicitly teaching that a woman's sexual desire or her lack of sexual desire is a message from God to the husband. And some pastors even teach that a wife's romantic love is needed to sanctify sex in marriage. Now, I think I've talked about both of these things in some of my previous videos here. This stuff, we got to get rid of this. We got to get rid of this in the church. He says what conservatives commonly mourn as a lost virtue is in reality a sickness that has grown more malignant over time for almost 1,000 years. The problem with courtly love and chivalry and this intertwining of romantic love, sanctifying sex, is not that it started as noble and was later twisted. The evil has been there all along, and it plays into a weakness men and women both exhibit, going all the way back to the fall in Genesis, where Adam gives in to his wife Eve and sins. It's a good article, boy. We got to get this corrected. Hey, if you like this content, give me a like, subscribe to my channel. Let me know what you think. Give me a comment. We got to get this turned around, though. Even with all that being said, Christ is winning. He is building his church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Until next time, this is the Post Millennial Man.